Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming here. I'm really excited to be able to introduce Jennifer Phillips for the defense of her dissertation. And I'm really excited that her family and friends could be here as well. I know she's really excited to have everybody come all the way from California with us. And I have a couple of, as I introduce, I want to share some photos. So Jenny is from California, and she did her undergrad at UC San Diego. And as she started, of course, from the very beginning, she did everything. She's a powerhouse. So she both had a major in behavior and biology, as also a minor in studio art. And as some of you might know, was an incredible rugby player as well, and still is. She can still kick my butt in the field. And then while she was an undergrad, she got a research scholarship to work on the Playground of Biologists, which is in Barrow, Colorado Island, working on stingless bee communication. And then went on to do two research assistantships. One at the Southwest Research Station with horned lizards. You can see her being really tough again. That's the theme. And then actually worked with me. So this was my most successful Ecolog posting ever. I posted saying I needed a field assistant, and Jenny answered. So I've actually known Jenny from before she did her PhD. We worked together out in California. And that was an amazing, that's the most intense field season I've ever had. Because I'd be like, oh, well, I think we've got enough for today. She's like, it's still light out, let's keep going. I'm like, okay. So I'm not sure who was the boss on that trip. But we got a lot done. And then she went on to do some work with the Forest Service with spotted owls, a really great demography project as a wildlife technician. And then got her master's in biology at CSU Fresno with a friend of mine, Madhukati, who I got to know better actually through Jenny. And that's when she started really working with white crowns, did her thesis on white crowns and communication, and also winter ecology in Gambel's white crowns in California. And then somehow we convinced her to come all the way to Louisiana to actually leave the beloved California for at least 4 years. I got her for 4, and that's something. And I'm really proud of her, though. I'm proud of her for finishing as fast as she did, for the amount of field work that she did. And she'll allude to this during her talk, but of course she won't underline it, so I'll underline it, which is that she didn't only do a full thesis in the last 4 years with 3 great chapters, one of which is already accepted for publication and 2 of which are going into review. But she also contributed to a large collaborative project with George Mason, and she was the lead in the field as well as in our captive work, and that work has amounted to a number of publications. So thank you, Jenny, because I'm not sure how it would have gotten done, because somewhere in there I was able to have a baby because Jenny was running the ship, so thank you. And this is, of course, a necessary slide. The famous Jenny with the bug photo. And with that, I just want to let everybody know that since Jenny is my first PhD student to finish, this is a very proud day for me. And she gets to be the inaugural interpretive dance of your thesis. So in my lab, students have to do an interpretive dance in order to graduate for me to sign off. And this was partly Sarah's idea too, so you can blame her. and so this is I'm not gonna, it's not a spoiler, I won't do a spoiler here, but this is showing Jenny preparing for her interpretive dance, which will be at 6:30 this evening at my house at 166 Audubon, which is an easy walk from campus. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. So it works.
All right. Okay, well, thanks, Liz, for that introduction. When I came to graduate school, I was interested in animal communication and behavior, and I focused my dissertation research on how natural selection and sexual selection affects acoustic communication. So we know that animals use acoustic communication to communicate, and there's good evidence that song is used in male-male competition and female choice, where a receiver's decision and response is drives sexual selection. So one way that signals can be reliable so that receivers make a beneficial response is when that signal is physically limited. So index signals consist of signals that are related to the health, age, reproductive status, or other physical trait of the sender. So for example, an elk's body size or antler size can indicate age or fighting ability, and a goby swimming ability can indicate parental care, their ability to give parental care. And a low frequency sound can indicate body size or vocal musculature in birds. So what are the benefits of acoustic signaling? Unlike joy from friends pretending to have muscles, actual physical limitations can't be faked. So what this means for male-male competition is that males can avoid physical fights, which is going to save them time, energy, risk of injury, and predation. And for females, this is going to allow them to make a beneficial choice so that hopefully they are mating with a good mate and they can get good genes for their offspring. So we know that animals can use acoustic signals for reliable information about a signal. But because bird song is a long-distance signal, song is also under natural selection. So environmental effects affect how signals travel, and one type of environmental effect is a soundscape. So soundscapes are the background noise that can occur in any given environment. Across evolutionary time, animals have had to deal with natural sounds, so abiotic and biotic factors. So here on the left, we have a meadow, and we can visualize this soundscape with a spectrogram. So on the top here, I have an amplitude spectrum, which is showing how loud this soundscape is. And on the bottom, I have a spectrogram, which has frequency or pitch on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. And let's listen to what this sounds like. So you can hear an abiotic factor, the stream, and you can hear other animals vocalizing from far away. So that makes up this kind of light gray spectrum of sound. In recent evolutionary time, animals are starting to have to adapt their signals to anthropogenic soundscapes. And so if we visualize this in an amplitude spectrum and a spectrogram, we see that this is much louder in general, and the frequency is concentrated, so it's darker down here at the bottom. So you can hear it almost sounds like white noise, but it's really not. White noise can be across the whole spectrum. All the power of that soundscape is really at that bottom, low frequency. Okay, so how can we understand masking of signals in urban soundscapes? We can, just like we visualize those soundscapes in a spectrogram, we can do that with the actual signal. Okay, so again, frequency is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. So down here on the left, we have a very low-pitched and slow notes that are staying at the same frequency. So they're basically like whistles. And on this side, we have a frequency modulated song, which means that the frequency is moving up and down. And so as a bioacoustic analyst, you can look at these songs and take measurements from these spectrograms and also in other various ways. But to give you guys the idea, you can take maximum frequency, so what's the highest note a bird is singing, and minimum frequency. And then you can calculate bandwidth, which is the difference between maximum and minimum. So what is the range that a bird can sing? So we know that soundscapes, especially anthropogenic soundscapes, can mask signals. So as you see here, minimum frequencies, or those lower frequencies, are more likely to be masked. So we have an overlap of the background noise with those lower frequencies in both of these signals. So some animals can adjust their signals to the soundscape. So one example is birds actually shifting their entire vocalization upward so that they're not masked. So some species can do this, while others don't shift their whole song, but they actually shift their minimum frequency, which can lead to a decrease in bandwidth, or that range range of songs they're singing, or the range of notes they're singing. And so one of the first examples to show this was in Europe, where great tits were singing low-pitched notes in quiet areas and higher-pitched minimum frequencies in noisier areas. And so we've seen this trend across multiple species across the world. And so these song changes in response to noise may have consequences in how these signals are responded to in contexts like male-male competition, because we know features of song, like bandwidth, are under sexual selection. And soundscapes are not only affect signal transmission, but they can also affect global communication behaviors, or the responses to signals. So this happens because of the way sound travels and is perceived. So for communication to be effective, signal's active space must overlap with the listening distance. And so noise affects the active space of the signal and can reduce that active space. And it can also reduce that listening distance. So if that happens, responses to signals may be affected. So if a receiver can't hear that signal, he may have to change his behavior and go closer to actually receive that signal. So we see here that both natural selection and sexual selection can shape the acoustic phenotypes of songs. The receivers select for informative signal content, and the environment selects for transmissible signal content. So we know this in theory, that both natural selection and sexual selection can act on song structure. But what we don't know is whether these two actually shape the same song. So both environmental effects and responder pressures are shaping the signal. What is the implication for communication? So this leads me into my questions I worked on during my dissertation. So over the past 4 years, I've led a field team in the Bay Area of California, setting up multiple study sites in San Francisco, urban San Francisco. You can see it's heavily urbanized there in the overview, and a little further north in rural Point Reyes. So this area is mostly scrub habitat, and this, of course, is very urban. And so over these years, I've created about at least 400 birds and made lots of recordings of all the males that are there. So to answer my questions, I focused on 2 areas. The Presidio of San Francisco, at the tip of the city there, and then Abbott Saloon and Point Reyes. And so if we zoom into these 2 landscapes, you can also see that Point Reyes is relatively quiet at 44.9 decibels compared to urban San Francisco, which is typically 55.5 decibels on average. And so to put this noise difference in context, a 6 decibel difference is a doubling in sound spectrum level. And so for humans, about a 10 decibel difference sounds twice as loud. And these birds, white-crowned sparrows, form dialects. So within different regions, they form regional dialects, and they respond to these differences in song structure. So just to give you an example of what the 2 dialects that I focus on in my dissertation, I look at the Twitter dialect, which is this one here. And you can see both dialects start with a middle, and then in the middle here we have complex notes. Some have a buzz as a type of complex, and then others have these trill-like complex notes. Then after complex notes, all dialects have a trill, and then some dialects also have a little terminal buzz at the end. And so one of the first studies I did here was looking at how minimum frequency changes, because that's what people were looking at the time, and we didn't know if this was happening in our study system as well. And so we did see that as background noise increases, minimum frequency, or those lowest notes, tend to increase. And it's really notable in the urban areas. What we still didn't know is if raising minimum frequency was also reducing song bandwidth. So this important to know because bandwidth is part of an index signal. So work has shown that words face a trade-off in the rate at which they sing and the bandwidth of those repeated notes because they're actively tracking fundamental frequencies. What I mean by this is when a bird is singing a high note, he has his beak wide open to hit that high note, and then as he's swooping this note downward, he's closing his beak until he gets to that lowest note. And then the muscles controlling his beak and vocal musculature are going to vary depending on each male. So the time it takes a male to get back up to this high point is going to vary, and how high he can actually sing the top and the low notes. So that's the trade-off between trill rate and bandwidth. And so males vary in their ability to maximize trill rate and bandwidth. And we call this trade-off vocal performance. So this variation serves as an index signal for selection to act. So if you look at a sample of performance, imagine these are individual males. We have trill rate on the x-axis and frequency bandwidth on the y-axis. We typically get this triangular distribution of songs. And from that, we can calculate a upper-bound regression. Then we can look at each individual and see how far from this line. So a low performance song would be a song that has a high deviation or further distance from that line. And a high performance song would have a small deviation, so it's closer to the line. So hereafter, when I talk about vocal performance, I'm talking specifically about this measure of vocal deviation from this upper bound. Okay, so building off that information about white-crowned sparrows and bandwidth as part of an index signal, I've addressed these three broad questions in my talk. So does vocal performance vary with the soundscape? Is vocal performance under central selection? And does noise affect the information content of vocal performance? So let's start with the first one. So across 3 years, I've done many recordings in Point Reyes in San Francisco. So typically get about 150 males per year and get 10 songs per male. So about 1,500 songs per year. And then after each recording, I'm taking a noise level. So in decibels, LAQ, taking 1 minute in each cardinal direction with 80. Then when we get back to the lab after the field season, sometimes during the field season, me and a huge team of undergrads go through these hours and hours of recording. So we are visually inspecting songs for quality, making sure they're not masked so that we can actually take measurements, resampling them, pulling out individual songs, and taking performance measurements, again with the trill rate, so that we can calculate vocal deviation. So what did we find? Within the San Francisco dialect, we found that minimum frequency does increase with noise, so same as we saw across multiple dialects. And that concurrently leads to a decrease in bandwidth. So bandwidth is changing in noise. We also saw that trill rate is actually increasing in noisier territories. So that might make up for the loss of bandwidth in terms of performance. But when we actually calculate vocal deviation, it's not. So males are still worse performers. They have a higher vocal deviation. Remember, higher vocal deviation is worse in noisier territories. So does vocal performance vary with the soundscape? All the song traits we examined were changing with noise. And this leads to higher pitched, low performance songs, which may affect receiver response. Okay, question 2. So is vocal performance under central selection? So 2 of my chapters fall under this broader question. So just to remind you guys, acoustic index signals provide information about the sender. So minimum frequency can provide information about body size. and vocal performance can provide information about beat size and vocal musculature. Within my study system, I actually found that higher performers have higher FAT scores. So this might indicate some sort of resource holding ability or having territory on a resource. And before I get into my actual experiments, I want to talk about the general setup of playback experimental design. So the standard way to understand whether birds discriminate and respond differently to song structure is to use territorial playback. This means I present each male with different song stimuli, and one song on one day, one song on the other day. They hear that song for about 3 minutes, and then I continue to watch them for 6 minutes afterwards. This is the post-playback period. And so what I'm watching for, the thing I'm paying the most attention to is distance from the speaker. So how close are they getting to that speaker? And the reason why is that closer approach indicates likelihood to attack. We've seen this and tested explicitly in related species. So it's an interpretable sign of aggression. So here's an example of a male responding strongly during post-playback.
Song 02. Song.
Okay, so you see there, I started this playback a while ago. This is during post-playback. He was somewhere on his territory, and he came in all the way to that speaker and is looking for someone to attack. There's no one there for him to attack, so he's just standing on the speaker, and he's sending out his keep out signal. And kind of looking around to see if someone's going to pop out of the bushes. So closer approach indicates like this. And so, again, my first year, I needed to answer some basic questions before I got to my specific questions within this system. So I did a few different playback experiments. So first, I wanted to know if minimum frequency was an informative signal for males. So I did a playback with a zero shifted song, so a regular song, and then a song that I shifted upward by 500 hertz. So there's a little gap there. But the bandwidth stayed the same. And I found that males did not change their response or give different responses to either of those stimuli. They respond equally as aggressively to both stimuli. Okay, so then I did it in the opposite direction. If I downshift the song and there's a regular minimum frequency and a lower minimum frequency, how will they respond? And again, I found no difference. So this was indicating to me that males are not differentiating between minimum frequencies. Okay, so what about bandwidth? So then I tried a full bandwidth song versus a low removed bandwidth song. So basically I erased some frequencies on the bottom of that trill on the low removed. And when I did that, I found that males respond more strongly to a wide bandwidth song. Okay, that's great. So, well, maybe these first trials weren't, maybe they weren't good enough or something. So we should try it on the high side as well. So do an opposite playback where we're reducing bandwidth from the top side of the song. So erasing frequencies up here. And we find the same thing. They respond more strongly to a wide bandwidth than they do a narrow bandwidth. And if you do compare the high remove versus the low remove, they treat them equally. So this told me that minimum frequency was not salient, but bandwidth appears to be more important. And that's interesting because we know bandwidth is part of this indexing. So my question for my first chapter was, is vocal performance a salient signal in urban and rural populations? My hypothesis is that it is. This should be a salient signal across locations because it's an indexing, providing information for procedures. Alternatively, vocal performance could not be a salient signal, maybe in urban locations, because signal content is altered by natural selection. So to test this, I created two types of stimuli. high performance song and a low performance song. So this high performance song is close to the upper bound regression line. It has a wide bandwidth and a fast trill. And the low performance song has a narrow bandwidth and a slow trill. So it's quite much further from the line. And if we look at this up close, I predict that somewhere in between those two, there's going to discriminate between these two stimuli. And I would predict that males would come closer to high performance songs based on what we've seen with other species. And so to analyze this, I did model selection using linear mixed models. I looked at a male's own vocal performance to see if that affected how strongly he responded. I looked at Julian date to see if there was any gait or breathing effects. And stimulus type as fixed. So stimulus type is what I think will actually change their response. And then I also used stimulus exemplar and bird as random effects because I had to test each bird twice, and a few of the stimulus exemplars were green. And I also did post-hoc tests to understand direction of response. So the model results. Stimulus type was the top model for both locations. So stimulus type I play is affecting their response. Second best model within 2AIC was stimulus type plus male vocal performance. So it seems like maybe male vocal performance has some importance. So to assess whether male's own vocal performance was affecting his response, I did model averaging and got importance scores. So male vocal performance, as compared to stimulus type, which has 100% importance, has only 2% importance in point range. But in the urban location, stimulus type has a 92% importance, and male vocal performance has 19%. So there might be a little bit more effective of male's own vocal performance in cities. Okay, so let's look at the actual raw responses. Rural males are responding more strongly to high-performance songs than low performance songs. So each of these lines is an individual male. So we can look at one male and see he comes this close for a high-performance song and this close for a low-performance song. So he's coming closer to a high-performance song than low performance. Remember, coming closer is more aggressive. So in general, males are coming closer to high performance than they are to low performance. And we see the same trend in urban males. So males are coming closer to high performance songs than they are to low performance songs. And so these results tell me that my prediction was upheld. So males are discriminating between high and low performance, and they are responding more strongly to high performance songs. Okay, so where do we go from here? These results agree with tests in other species where females tend to prefer high performance songs, and males distinguish between competitors even vocal performance. But remember, vocal performance is made up of two components. And one problem is there have been varying ways to test performance as a sexually selected trait. So some test only trill rate, so they're comparing fast trill versus slow trill. Some test only bandwidth. Others test the way I just tested, which is using both at the same time. So both bandwidth and both trill rate are manipulated. The problem with this is they still could be reacting only to trill rate or only to bandwidth because both are manipulated. Furthermore, some studies are actually using different song types to test variation in performance. So that confounds performance with complexity. So this is a different type of note or shape of note than this one up here. So this is important not only from a sexual selection standpoint, but from a natural selection standpoint, which affects these two components differently. So remember, wide bandwidth, low frequencies are more likely to be masked, like you see down here. And narrow bandwidths are less likely to be masked, you see here. Also, slow trills transmit better in urban areas. They're less likely to be echoed, so they're easier to pick apart in noise. So my second chapter answers this specific research question. Do songs of the same vocal deviation, different trill rates or bandwidth elicit similar responses? My hypothesis is that vocal performance itself is the salient index signal. Thus, songs with equal performance should elicit equal responses. Alternatively, trill rate or bandwidth alone could be the salient signal. And so understanding how birds do this differentiate between these different components in quiet conditions in point range is going to allow me to better understand how noise affects how males assess these signals. So similar to chapter 1, I created multiple stimuli. This time I did 3 types of stimuli, and I tested 50 individual males. So that's pretty high for a behavioral experiment. So again, I have a high performance song that I call A, that is wide bandwidth and fast trill. And then I have 2 lower performance songs that are kind of mid-range, a narrow bandwidth fast trill song, or B, and a wide bandwidth slow trill song, or C. And so these 2 have equal deviations from the line and statistically equal vocal performance. So here's a close-up cartoon of those stimuli, and again, you can just see that the dotted lines are pointing out that A and B have the same fast trill, the same trill rate. So when males are assessing this one versus this one, they're actually assessing the differences in bandwidth. And when a male hears stimulus A versus stimulus C, there's differences in trill rate here, but they have the same bandwidth. And so I predict that males will respond stronger to a high-performance stimulus, but they will respond equally to songs that are of equal performance. So these 2 that have the same vocal deviation should get an equal response. And that is what I see. So we compare a wide bandwidth song with fast trill to narrow bandwidth song with fast trill. So 2 songs that are only different in bandwidth. We see that males come closer to wide bandwidth than they do to narrow bandwidth, and it's significant. When we compare fast trill to slow trill, that is also significant. So they prefer fast trill, and they're responding more strongly to fast trills than they are to slow trills. And when you compare the 2 equal performance songs, those get an equal response. So that prediction is also upheld. Males are responding equally to songs with equal performance, and males respond most strongly to a high performance song. So with all these playback experiments, I provide support for vocal performance being under sexual selection. Males respond to differences in overall performance and to trill rate alone or bandwidth alone. And when songs have the same performance level, they respond to it. So this all supports that vocal performance is sexually selective for male-male composition. Okay, so my third chapter looks at, does noise affect the information content of vocal performance? So now I'm going to focus in on the city. And in general, the city is louder than a rural soundscape, but it still does have variation within the city. So looking at this broad overview map of San Francisco, you can see, of course, that it's always noisier where it's red, so closest to roads. But on the scale I'm looking at different territory levels between males, you actually also see variation. So on the left, I have a map that shows differences between all of the sites I've sampled. But within one of my study sites, the loudest site, there's actual variation here. So closer to a road usually has the loudest territory noise, and the further away you get, it can be quieter. So within my 2016 San Francisco male study sample, there's a noise range from 44 decibels, which, remember, that's about the average in a rural quiet location, and as loud as 16.1 decibels. So there's quite a range within a city that can be quiet pockets. And remember, we've just found out that sexual selection is selecting for wide bandwidth, fast trill, or higher performance songs for male competition in terms of effective communication. But we know that natural selection in cities is selecting for narrow bandwidth, fast trill songs for lower performance than these wide bandwidth songs. So we don't know if male is facing natural selection pressures of sound and noisy soundscapes will still respond to local performance as an indexing, the way we saw in the rural population. Additionally, we don't know if, or we don't know why urban birds are more aggressive. So multiple studies have shown that urban birds are more aggressive to territorial playback overall. The people have tested to see if it's testosterone or conspecific density or suitable nesting habitat, and none of those seem to explain why urban males are more aggressive. And so this final part of my dissertation looks at how noise affects assessment of local performance. First, does noise affect response to local performance, trill rate, or bandwidth? And does noise affect overall aggressive response? So are males changing their behaviors in noise compared to 5 territories? So again, I used a 3-stimulus experimental design with a high performance song and 2 lower performance songs that have equal vocal performance. This one has wide bandwidth, this one has narrow bandwidth and fast trill, and this one's slow trill. So same setup, and this is with 22 males in San Francisco. Again, I used linear mixed models with AIC model selection, and we squared an exemplar as random factors. Again, repeated measures design. And stimulus type was a fixed effect, and now I have noise level as a fixed effect. I also put in the interaction between stimulus type and noise to see if the way males discriminate between a high performance and low performance song changes as it gets noisier. And so I hypothesized that males can distinguish vocal performance, but that noise affects the response. So in quiet territories, I expect males to respond strongest to high-performance songs. So, yeah, so these two should be significantly different, high performance compared to any of the lower performance songs. And that males will treat equal song or equal performance songs equally. So same as I saw in a rural population. But I hypothesized that as it gets noisier, males will become overall more aggressive to all levels of vocal performance. But they will also lose discrimination against narrow bandwidth, songs because of masking. So I expect that these high performance songs with wide bandwidth will be masked in noisier territories so that they actually treat these two the same. So this one started here, and I expect it to go to here in noise. And for wide bandwidth slow trill, I expect this to shift down a little bit because I expect males to be more aggressive in noise. But because it's slow trill, they can still tell it's low performance, so it should be less than the others. So the major changes between these two, I expect narrow bandwidth fast trill songs to be significantly different than wide bandwidth slow trill songs. And trill differences to still be significant, but then these two to be the same. And another way to visualize an increased aggressive response in noise is to just look at across all trials, are males coming closer in noise. So this would be another way to predict an overall increase in aggression. So males responding more strongly, which means a closer approach in a noisier territory than So the top model had stimulus type and noise in the model. So both stimulus type and noise is having an effect on response. But the interaction term did not improve. So what this was telling me is that discrimination between stimuli is not changing, which is something I predicted. So no matter how noisy it is, males are responding to differences in bandwidth. So males come closer to a wide bandwidth song than they do to a narrow bandwidth song. They are still statistically treating these equally. So these are same performance levels. But they're also not statistically treating slow trill different than fast trill. So what I had predicted for quiet territories was that slow trill songs would still be up here. So the slow trills seem to be maybe benefiting somehow from, or they're not differentiating between trills in urban areas. And we see that males respond overall more aggressively in noisier territories. So no matter what song no matter what stimulus song is playing, they're coming closer in general when it's noisy. But they're still discriminating. So if you remember the reasons why index signals were useful, it's that it allows receivers to respond appropriately, such that it benefits them. If males can't properly assess those signals from a normal distance, they risk a closer approach to be able to hear that signal. So if that sender is a threat, the receiver may have made a wrong decision to approach, and the receiver or the sender might face bodily injury during the fight. So closer approach in noise may have costs because males are not able to discriminate signal content from a further. So in summary, does noise affect the salience of performance? Urban birds are not statistically distinguishing between fast and slow trills. So this might be because slow trills travel better in urban canyons, so they're less echoed and easier to distinguish. So that might be having some effect on this trill response. I also found that males respond more to wide bandwidth, but urban soundscapes are selected for narrower bandwidth. So there's this conflict between what sexual selection is, or what's useful in sexual selection for male competition versus what natural selection is actually selecting for on these signals. And I found that males respond more aggressively on easier territories. So this could be because males can't distinguish sender qualities unless approach more closely to be able to assess the signal. So in conclusion, I found that vocal performance varies with the soundscape, such that songs are lower performance in noisier areas. And I provide support for vocal performance functioning in sexual selection for male-male competition. I also find support for noise affecting the information content of vocal performance, which is affecting male response overall. So communication behaviors in general are being affected by noise in areas. The broad implication of these results is that natural selection and sexual selection may be opposing forces, such that songs are losing bandwidth due to urban soundscapes, and information and content is lost for sexual selection, and natural selection shaping the signals. So birds adapted to be heard over noise may have a harder time assessing the competitors, which leads to overall higher aggression at all levels of performance. And there could be potential cascading effects over time. So with that, I have to thank first and foremost my advisor Liz. Brought me into this white-crowned sparrow system. I could still be studying bees. So thanks for that. And you've been a huge part in my development as a scientist and a person. I'm very grateful for that. And additionally, thanks so much to my mom, and dad, and my partner Sarah for all their continual support. So they've always been there for me, especially when there was no funding for research assistants. I was recruited and got some help in whatever way they could. They were always there. And that also includes my brother Jeff, who also helped build meat lock syringes. He had sandwiches for me when I was meat lock. And across the years, I've had the pleasure of working with great field crews, all who put up with very early mornings and very long days, as was mentioned. So yeah, Kathleen Grady was there my first season, and she taught me how to band and take all these measurements in true PRBO style. And May, Danny, Mike, Leanne, Natasha, so a mix of graduate students and undergrads have all come to the field and helped out in some way. And lastly, thanks to my committee for all their input and thoughtful comments throughout my time at Tulane, and also for my collaborators. As Liz mentioned, there's an overarching project, so we have a lot of collaboration with Mason, and have some postdocs come through. They've been great in teaching me new skills, and all the undergrads that have helped with these massive works. So I know hopefully some of you guys are here, but it takes a lot of work to get through these recordings. And fellow graduate students for who you've been saying, and the department for funding, AMU, and the Wilson Morphological Society, and Secretary. So I'm lucky to have had all this support. So with that, I will take any questions. Yeah. The receiver, yeah. Yeah, so I didn't explain that very in depth. But yeah, so a male's own vocal performance could affect his response, right? So if he's a low performance male, you might expect him to respond less to a high performance song because he doesn't want to get beat up, right? So that can have an effect. There's different personalities and things like that as well that can affect, there's variation within males and how they respond. So in the rural population, I didn't find very much support for a male's own vocal performance affecting the response. And in urban populations, there was a little bit more, but in general, it wasn't the main effect. So it does help explain some of the variation, but it's not a main effect. And that might be the way I designed the stimuli, is to be kind of at the top end of the natural range and the bottom end of the natural range. So most males are going to be kind of in the middle. There might be some that were closer to the stimuli, especially in that first experiment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it depends. Yeah, it depends by species. Yeah, it's hard. So you try to pick within the natural range. So a lot of times you see males will be like, oh, I'm definitely not going for that when it's a super stimulus. Like, that guy's crazy. That's not physically possible. So that's one way to see, okay, this is when they actually will just stop responding, or it's like too threatening. And then for females, oftentimes they're like, oh, that's super sexy. That's above and beyond, because no one can do that. But I mean, again, I said it's the top level, but there are males that sing that level of song. So it's hard to say where exactly males just make that discrimination line, I guess. Yes, Steve?
We have territories.
Yeah, typically they're about 100-meter diameter. The territories are bigger in the rural areas usually. So basically, I go out and I watch each bird the night before, a couple of days before usually, and see. Usually males have about 3 song perches in each one, and see where they go, and you watch their interactions with their neighbors and get a feel for where their territory is. So I try to put the speaker near the center of the territory. But yeah, sometimes I might be a little bit wrong, and that might be why some of the responses aren't as strong in one direction or the other. I feel like I'm missing a second part of that question. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, Cass. Did I see females? The The females, yeah, they get excited too. They'll sometimes respond and come in and do little like wing waves and solicitations. So yeah, so they do respond. But yeah, I was just focused on the males for the actual experiments, and it's harder to keep track of them. In terms of what?
Like in addition to the soundscape, what
What else do they want to think about? Well, yeah, I mean, food sources, nesting habitat, places to hide. Yeah, certain parts of the city you don't see very many birds, so they're scrub birds. So if there's scrub, they're usually there. Blackberry, Quizno, anything that they can build a nest in. I've seen them build nests in little tufts of grass. So just they need something. Yeah, the amount of cement might be a thing. That might be a possibility, and then starting to look at that in terms of our male performers on territories that have less cement or less urban features.
Yeah, I thought that your result on increasing aggression in urban noise was really interesting. And it seems like compared to the rural males that those urban males are discriminating less. So do you think that there's something going on where if as a male you can't discriminate as well between stimuli, that you're just like kind of always responding strongly?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing is they are responding more strongly overall to all levels, but they are still discriminating that bandwidth. So yeah, it seems like those other studies found urban males are more aggressive, and this is kind of some initial support from sound maybe explaining that and why they're coming closer so that they can actually assess a signal. Steve?
How do the is that something that you more?
Well, it's hard to see a fight unless you're sitting there all day. Early in the breeding season, that's when they're establishing territories. So that's when you're likely to see that more often. And a lot of these I don't think I actually said this, but these birds live there year round. And so oftentimes, once a male has established a territory, he's kind of there for a while. They might shift a little bit. And males get to know their neighbors too. So they get kind of a stranger, they get familiar with their neighbors' songs as compared to a stranger's song. So when I do these playbacks, I don't use a neighbor's song as the stimulus because he might be like, oh, that's Bob, it's fine. I know he's over there. So. Yeah, I mean, so doing these behavioral trials are looking at the individual level, but I do think knowing this kind of stuff is important for sound mitigation and informing management decisions, especially when cities are just building more and more freeways, more lanes, and loud. It's getting louder. So I do think it can be extrapolated out, and so sharing results with Caltrans or with any transportation agency, or the Presidio is a park, right? So they're trying to make a nice green space, and they need to know these kinds of things. So just giving them my sound level data information is useful for them,